Welcome to the Nano podcast. I'm your host, Will Chernlin, and I'm excited to have you join me on this journey through the world of nano-cap companies. For the past decade, I've talked to thousands of business owners across various industries. It's been an enlightening experience revealing the vast tapestries of entrepreneurship and innovation that thrives beneath the surface of mainstream media coverage. Each week, I will interview different leaders of nano-cap publicly traded companies to learn about their history, what they do now, and their future. As a reminder, none of this information is financial advice, and it is all for entertainment purposes only. Let's start this week's episode. Hi, everyone. This week we have Alex Yang, the CEO of Polaryx Therapeutics, stock ticker PLYX. Polaryx Therapeutics is a biotech firm focused on lysosomal storage disorders to help solve rare diseases. Alex, thanks for coming on the show.
Thank you, Will. Good to be here.
So, Alex, going through your LinkedIn, where I start with most guests, I see you went to law school in NYU, and then you shortly after ended up in Hong Kong working on biotech. And I was trying to kind of connect those two things together. So I would love if you could kind of fill in the gaps of kind of where you grew up, why you went to NYU, and then what got you to Hong Kong.
I immigrated to the U.S. when I was 16 years old. Spoke very little language, of course, from Korea. Grew up in New York City and tried to catch up on a lot of things. And my dad, who passed away a long time ago, told me, hey, you should try to be a lawyer. Maybe you can speak better language and, maybe try to help me and other immigrants. But so I went to NYU Law and practiced. So we started as an international tax practice for a couple of years, and then moved to Hong Kong, and I actually joined Morgan Stanley, and then from a legal department to then later private equity division as well. And then I moved around between consulting firms and other law firms for another good part of 15, 20 years after that. And so in 2016, I decided to take it sort of on my own, and I advise a lot of people on many businesses, set up funds, done a lot of M&As, and get companies listed as well as go through a lot of restructuring and so forth. But I always felt that I wanted to do something on my own, and so when I first started as a family office, I started to look at some of the industries, and I always had high regards for health, and obviously people live longer now, and so healthcare was really something I wanted to focus on. And so that's when I started investing in a few companies, and then really gotten into it, and then later decided to have a incubation platform called M-Stone, and M-Stone is a company that we now own a number of companies, and we basically set up from the ground up. And then we license the technologies from research institutions. We range from drug development companies, just like Polaryx and a few other companies that mainly focus on pediatric orphan indications. But also we have companies in medical devices with manufacturing company in Korea. We have recently also launched AI healthcare services companies. And so, yeah, we're very lucky to have been able to build the platform like that. But it's kind of a long journey, but I really enjoy where I am. And our team also has been extremely dedicated and also very helpful to put all the companies together.
And so while you're working at Morgan Stanley, when you're seeing all these different businesses and different deals and such, were you thinking that whole time, okay, I really like this biotech scene. I think that there's a lot of advances going on and a lot of were you thinking that, okay, this is the industry I've made the most connections in, so it makes the most sense to kind of double down here? Or kind of like, how did you migrate to the biotech opposed to any other business sector?
Sure. I mean, I think it's interesting. People have asked me, and especially now I've been in this industry for over 10 years, managing a number of drug development companies and other healthcare companies that, how did you end up here? In fact, I never studied biology in my college years or major in economics and became a lawyer and a banker. And so I think to me, it sort of happened naturally, as mentioned to you, when I started M-Stone about 10 years ago as a family office. I kind of took a liking of healthcare just generally. But before then, when I was a banker at Morgan Stanley or a lawyer doing a lot of deals, I was more industry agnostic. But what I really learned a lot from that was logical thinking and also thinking about strategies and listening to people as to what the issues are. And I think, now I'm the CEO of multiple companies, and when we look at issues from regulatory sides, from the scientific, from CMO and manufacturing, and a number of areas, what's important is that not necessarily you become an expert in each of those, sub segments of your businesses, but you have good understanding of ticking time and also listening to people, and then making sure that you have strategies and people have open dialogues to really discuss them, and then you can give the direction. And I think that the training I've had and the jobs that I have gone through over the years really trained me to become that person that I am today.
So to kind of double down on that, you've seen all these different businesses. You've ran a family office / kind of incubator for the last 10 years. What made Polaryx Therapeutics the one you wanted to spend the majority of your time on? What was the thing that made you most interested when you heard about the technology that you said, hey, this isn't just another investment I want to make for the family office. This is something I want to actually pour my heart and soul into?
Well, obviously the disease areas that Polaryx is focused on has really a lot of emotional impact and the touch, because obviously, as mentioned, these are children mostly born with gene mutations, and it's a really tough disease. And I think that, obviously over the years we have met with the family members and clinicians, and so that really has a lot of emotional bonding and sort of purpose, obviously. But what really got me interested was the science part, number one. And, even though it's a really devastating disease with gene mutations and they're born with these conditions, and, onset sometimes happen as early as 6 months or 2 years or 3 years, and they go through a number of different symptoms, but ultimately they cause premature death, and symptoms range from seizures to the mental development issues. There are movement disorders, and you lose your visual and go blind. And so it really goes in multiple areas and challenges to the families. And so even despite that, because it is a gene mutation and we have 50 to 70 different known genes that are causing this lysosomal storage disorder, and if we can address that effectively, then we can actually treat the disease. And I like Polaryx because we have a very precise science which uses the animal models, which now using the CRISPR technologies nowadays, that you can actually create a right, precise animal model to test your drugs. Whereas if you look at cancer or Alzheimer's and others, there isn't really a precise animal model. So how could you make a mouse have a cancer through smoking or through drinking a lot or doing all kinds of other stressful activities that might cause? These are multifactorial diseases. Whereas the disease area that we're focused on, which only has a single cause, that is the gene mutation. And usually it's a one single gene mutation. Of course, there are multiple subtypes, as mentioned, 50 to 70 different genes, each of them causing different types of lysosomal storage disorder. And so because of that, we have a precise animal model. And what we have identified over the years and looking at our science is that using the precise model, we're able to demonstrate significant efficacy with the animal models that gives us a very high confidence of animal to human translatability. And that's what got me really excited. And the other thing is many other companies in our competitions and also trying to develop drugs, because it's a single gene mutation, they often focus on one indication, trying to just address through gene therapy or enzyme replacement therapy. And that takes really long time. And as it may sound good, but these therapies involve very, very toxic, highly invasive administration. And so it is not really effective if you think about it, even if there is some kind of drug that's out there. And so what I really like about Polaryx is that, we have a very safe and easy dosing. It's a liquid oral solution form. And so family members don't have to visit hospitals all the time to get treated. And so these are some of the things that I find it really appealing to the family members at the ground level. This is what they need. And so that's what got me excited. And the fact that we're having this kind of a platform approach, we called it the basket trial. So with one lead drug, we're testing multiple indications all at the same time. And that's what these family members need. As mentioned to you, there are many, many sub diseases within lysosomal storage disorder that we're targeting. And it just takes too long if you're just trying to address one drug with one indication at a time. And so we like the fact that we have a platform model to address multiple indications in one trial with the lead drug. And so these are something that what really got me excited to really focus on Polaryx so that we can get the drugs to the market where it's really needed. Most of the indications that I'm talking about within lysosomal storage disorder have virtually no drugs that's approved. And so they have no drugs available to actually, get them better. And that's the problem. And that's what making Polaryx really unique.
Yeah. And if you could touch on your kind of CRISPR method with using the animals first and how that kind of helps with not only figuring out what's going to solve, but also I think I was listening or reading somewhere that it also allows you to help on the ethical side of things, that you don't have to have these kind of placebo studies as much with children, which seems like kind of an odd concept of telling a child, hey, we have a cure for you, and then it's just, say, a sugar pill.
Yes.
Tell me a little bit more about that.
Yeah, so it's a really tough proposition. And when you're coming from a regulator standpoint, FDA, who is later going to have to approve the drug, their position has been largely that, hey, we need to make sure that it's your drug that's working. And we need to objectively demonstrate that it's your drug that's doing or helping the children to get these clinical benefits. And obviously, to understand it, you have to come up with some sort of what we call endpoints. You have to measure certain domains and certain symptoms that are aligned with the disease. And so if the patient is treated with your drug and then it goes through a certain disease progression and showing certain domains of symptoms, and if these are objective and you can measure that against a controlled group where they're not treated with your drug, but you're going to somehow have to do enough. Now, the issue with this placebo-controlled trial, typically we call it randomized 1-to-1 or 1-to-2. But so let's say you enroll 40 patients. Then you put 20 patients under your drug, and then the other 20 in a placebo-controlled arm, which means you basically are given sugar that tastes like your drug. Now, if this is only 2 to 3 months trial duration, then perhaps they may be willing to come in, because after this, perhaps there is objective evidence that your drug is really working against the other group. Now, it may sound something like, okay, that's very scientific, but if you think about it in more deeper dive, 20 versus 20 may not necessarily give you enough statistical significance. And especially when we're dealing with ultra rare indications, you don't have hundreds and hundreds of patients to be enrolled. You just don't have that option. And so you only have few patients to really compare. So then when you have 20 versus 20, how do you know these 20 patients that you're putting up against the other 20 are similar patients? They're all coming in different ages and different stages of disease. You're not really comparing apple to apple anyway. And then placebo, especially when we're dealing with some of these diseases, these are really challenging diseases with symptoms that are arising in many, many different times. And so we call it heterogeneous symptoms, but then also for a long term. So our trial in most of these cases, lysosomal storage disorder, would have to be on for 2 years per patient. So you have to be on a trial for almost 2 years or sometimes even longer. So it's a long-term trial. So then a placebo effect is really not even there yet. And then the other part, which is really important, is that this ethical point. I mean, you're asking the family members and the patients, these children, to join your program for the promise that, hey, here's the drug's mechanism of action. This is what we're showing. Please join us so that maybe we can see some results. And then you're saying, well, for next 2 years, which could potentially really have deteriorating disease progression over that time. And then, well, there's a definitive chance that 50% chance that you'll get sugar. It's just not an ideal proposition for you to enroll these patients. And so, although from a objective standpoint, at a very high level, you like to have two arms. One is treated with the drug arm, and then the other is a control arm with placebo. But when you're dealing with ultra rare and especially with children in a long-term trial and heterogeneous type of symptoms shown, it's very, very difficult. And family members do not want to come on that. So what we have tried to do is, okay, let's get all the patients with the promise that they'll get our drugs only. So we call that open label study. So there's no control arm, placebo arm. So all the patients that are enrolled to our trial will get our drug. But what we try to do in order to still show some comparison is to have natural history data. So we have licensed in a lot of these data from research institutions. And unfortunately, many of the children who have had these diseases have lived and died. And we have 2 decades worth of data, over 100 to 200 children with multiple indications. And through that natural history data, we have measured these important criteria and domains, which will then also measure in our treatment arm. And there are obviously some of the domains that are more objectively measured. There are, of course, other areas that we measure, sort of quality and a number of areas that could be somewhat subjective, depending on the raters and maybe family members look at it in different ways. But what we have identified with the FDA and also through the works of a lot of the clinicians is that there are certain domains. So, for example, visual acuity or speech or gait and certain things can be measured objectively, even though it was measured 20 years ago, because it is a pretty simple test. And so we're trying to compare those with those patients who have lived. And then we have such a thing called propensity scores, where we could actually match some of the patients in the natural history data to the right ones in our treatment arm. So all of these efforts are basically elevating the comparability of the two groups. But because we're using the natural history data, we don't have to have concurrent, two arms where then, 50% of our patients currently enrolled will be given placebo. So we're trying to avoid that by having that kind of a trial design, which I think is very important from an ethical standpoint. But also I think that we should be able to raise the bar significantly to show how we can demonstrate it's our drug that's actually working and providing benefits.
So I'm going to change lanes a little bit here. I was curious, I was reading somewhere you're working with a university out of Chicago, I believe, but there's a lot of great universities too in Hong Kong. Is there any sort of strategic advantage to being in Hong Kong from a access to capital point of view, access to universities? Is there some sort of advantage that you have with working out of Hong Kong opposed to having to start and do everything out of the US? Or is it just a time zone difference and the world's flat nowadays?
Yeah, well, I mean, I'm here. I've been sort of based here for the last 25 years. And even before I started M-Stone, I've been here. I've established my relationship, and like you said, Will, a lot of the network that provides us with the capital and strategies. But in terms of our team members are really handling the clinical trials and regulatory, it's all in the U.S. And like you said, we work with Rush University. That's the institution that has licensed us the original technology. Obviously, we're commercializing them, and they're based in Chicago. And we have a chief scientific officer based in Chicago. We have a chief medical officer based in San Francisco. We have CFO in Philly, and we have other members in the U.S. And so, but we do have a lot of teams that are also based in Hong Kong, primarily investor relations and investment-related stuff and investors relations. Of course, since we're listed in NASDAQ, which I think is a great strategy, now, obviously, we work with, a lot of folks in the U.S., the banking relationships, the research analysts as well. And obviously, we do plan to expand our shareholder roster to be filled with more U.S. and, I guess, fundamental investors going forward.
So kind of my last question is just for you all, how meaningful is the orphan drug designation or rare pediatric disease or fast track? Are those significant and pouring gasoline on a fire, or are they more kind of symbolic?
No. These are really important, Will. So orphan drug designation is something that you can get for your drug asset. And once it's approved, regardless of your patent situation, you do get market exclusivity from the US FDA and then also EMA, the European side, because we also have a rare pediatric designation that we can get to about 7.5 years of market exclusivity. So no other drugs, because our drug is approved, can compete against us even if our patent has expired. In Europe, it'll be 10 years. So orphan drug designation is quite important. Of course, it's important that you get to that approval before others, because whoever gets that approval with that drug gets that market exclusivity. Of course, in our case, we also have multiple patents of our asset and formulation. So we obviously have protection, IP protection, not just based on regulatory market exclusivity on the orphan drug designation, but we do also have fast track designation that's recently received, and you can get that a little later once your study is clear with the FDA. Of course, Soteria, that's a basket trial, which I mentioned to you, is like a platform with one lead drug. We're doing multiple indications at the same time. It's a very unique in the market. Basket trial had to be cleared. And so that's what we call IND, as it has been cleared. So once the IND is cleared, then you can potentially request to the FDA that can we get fast track designation. What that gives you is once you go through the discussions with the FDA, especially at the later stage for approval, you get an expedited process. So you don't have to wait years to get the FDA to pour their resources to review your case. So you can get that kind of accelerated approval process. Now, for us, I think that we're also going to go for later on what's called breakthrough therapy designation. And that designation is given when you have some actual patients' data that have given some positive clinical benefits, meaning that your drug has shown some efficacy. That's not the level of drug approval. A drug approval obviously requires, as mentioned to you, statistical analysis and all of that, and very rigorous discussions with the FDA to get that final approval for marketing and getting to the market. But breakthrough therapy designation is also very important for us, and we think that we can get to that point in the next couple of years effectively. According to the research, roughly about 76% of all the drugs that have gotten breakthrough therapy designation end up getting the drug approval. So from a listed company standpoint, it's quite important to get to that stage to show that we have, obviously proven and gotten to some sort of inflection point. And I think the other part, which is really important for our investors, for Polaryx, is that it's highly risk diversified because of the platform model. We're basically going after multiple indications with one drug. And many of the centers of excellence, these sites where we enroll patients, they do in fact serve patients with these multiple indications all at the same time, because these are all similar lysosomal storage disorders. And so we can save a lot of money, time, by kind of combining multiple indications at the same time. And also from, the standpoint of how we manage these inflection points with open label design, as mentioned to you earlier, when you have a phase 3 or some sort of trial design that has a randomized and these double-blind nature, that means you cannot disclose any of clinical data until it's completed. So, investors and anybody, family members of the patients, they have no knowledge, no information as how the trial is going. On the other hand, when you have an open label trial design, then we have a flexibility and option to actually disclose a lot of this information. And so there will be multiple inflection points along the line for the investors, even not to wait until the end of the trial, but we'll have even during the trial, we should be able to announce a lot of these information. And as mentioned to you, after fast track designation, we can go for breakthrough therapy designation, which will allow us to gain significant corporate value. And so it has a lot of risk diversified, but also many inflection points to come along even before the completion of the trial. So it has a good design for investors, but also, as mentioned to you earlier, our mission is to get our drug as a standard of care as quickly as possible to the market, because it's completely unmet. And so we want to get the drugs to the market with multiple indications that have no drugs out there as quickly as we can through this basket trial design. And so it does make a lot of sense holistically.
No, yeah, I love the idea of you having kind of the basket and the platform. Comes back to kind of your PE point of view of having it all risk adjusted.
Yes.
And making sure that you're not getting too crazy in one direction or another.
That's right. Yeah, it's not binary,
so,
right?
Yeah, no, exactly. And so as you're hoping for the breakthrough therapeutic designation and such, and as we wrap up here, what gets you excited? What gets you out of bed? What do the next 5 years look like? Best case scenario, kind of what does the future look like for Polaryx Therapeutics?
Yeah, so we're at a very critical stage. We engaged a CRO who's obviously very much experienced in dealing with these rare indications. So we'll be starting with opening several sites in the U.S. and expand it to Europe. In the next couple of months, as we sign up these sites, we expect to enroll patients in the next couple of months, and that'll be really exciting. And then we have initial sort of safety guardrail that we need to assess. And once that's done, then we should be able to enroll patients all across multiple indications. And we're going to see that in late kind of this year or early next year. And so these are some of the things that we're really looking forward as we enroll our patients and see how they're doing. As mentioned to you, our science is very strong, and we have all specific animal models that have shown significant improvement across a number of different scientific findings. And so with that, strong scientific conviction and animal to human translatability, what we have done is put a trial design that really works for the family members with an open label design, but also really trying to gather the right information so that we can objectively say that this is our drug that's doing the job. And we have spent a lot of time creating that design for family members as well as from investors' point of view and our perspectives to demonstrate that. And so I think next 2 to 3 years will be really exciting. And as mentioned to you, there'll be multiple inflection points and information to come out. And so I think that every few months, we're going to have more information to share. So yeah, we're very excited and committed to this.
Well, that's awesome to hear. Thank you so much for coming on the show and all you do for helping like the most vulnerable children out there. If my listeners want to learn more about what you all are up to, where should I send my audience?
Oh, we have Polaryx Therapeutics website. We also have LinkedIn and we have many social media outlets. So, but please visit our website. It has a lot of information, and our ticker is PLYX, and so you can also check that out as well.
Awesome, sounds good. Well, for those of you still listening, please remember to subscribe and review. Thanks.
Thank you.
This podcast is for informational purposes only and does not provide financial, legal, or any other advice. The information is not investment advice or any offer to buy or sell any securities or to make any investment. The views expressed by the guests are their own, and any reference to third-party products, services, or information does not constitute an endorsement, therefore, by NanoCap Podcast or its affiliates. The NanoCap Podcast Express disclaims all liability for any individual's use of the information presented in this podcast.